The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my kitchen floor, the same kitchen where I'd cooked countless Sunday dinners for my family. Claire, my daughter-in-law's sister, fidgeted with her napkin. "There's something I need to tell you, Lillian," she began, her voice barely a whisper. My hand tightened around my teacup. "It's about Victor and Chelsea." My heart skipped a beat. Victor, my husband of 40 years. Chelsea, my daughter-in-law's sister. An unsettling premonition washed over me. "What is it, Claire?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw them at the mall yesterday." She hesitated, her eyes darting round the room, as if looking for an escape. "They were holding hands in the parking lot. I don't think it was the first time." The teacup rattled in my hand. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Victor's late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the expensive gifts he'd claimed were business expenses. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. "Are you sure about this, Claire?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. "Positive," she replied, her voice firm. I recognized his car, and well, they weren't exactly trying to hide it. I closed my eyes, the image of my husband holding hands with another woman searing itself onto the back of my eyelids. "Thank you for telling me, Claire," I managed to say, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. "I appreciate your honesty." She nodded, relief washing over her face. I thought you should know," she mumbled, standing up to leave. "I hope I haven't caused any trouble." "No trouble at all, dear," I said, offering a weak smile. As soon as the door closed behind her, the carefully constructed facade crumbled. I sank back into my chair, the weight of betrayal crushing me. 40 years. 40 years of building a life together, of raising a family, of sharing joys and sorrows. And now this, the thought of confronting Victor, of the inevitable fight, the messy unraveling of our lives, filled me with dread. But another feeling began to surface, a quiet resolve, a steely determination that surprised even me. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't let him take everything we'd built together. I wouldn't let him humiliate me. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my purpose clear. I walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling garden Victor and I had cultivated over the years. The lake cabin shimmered in the distance, a testament to our shared dreams and hard work. The rental properties we owned, the family business we'd nurtured, they were all part of my legacy too. He wouldn't get away with this, not while I still had breath in my body. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. "Hello, David," I said, my voice regaining its strength. "I need to see you. It's about my will and a few other things." The wheels were in motion. I wouldn't confront him directly, not yet. I needed time to strategize, to plan my next move. I knew Victor. He was arrogant, careless, and most importantly, he underestimated me. He thought I was just a simple housewife, content with my garden and my Sunday dinners. He had no idea about the years I'd spent learning the ins and outs of our finances, the legal loopholes, the quiet power I held within our family trust. He'd made a grave mistake, underestimating the woman who stood beside him for 4 decades. He'd exposed his weakness, and now I would exploit it. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. I met with my financial advisor, meticulously reviewing our assets, ensuring every penny was accounted for. I revised my will, making sure my son, Jason, and his family were protected. Chelsea and Julian, well, they wouldn't be seeing a dime. I even consulted with a private investigator, gathering evidence of Victor's infidelity, building a case so airtight he wouldn't be able to deny it. All the while, I maintained the charade, playing the role of the unsuspecting wife, observing Victor's every move, every lie, every stolen glance at his phone. He was growing bolder, more confident in his deception. He started coming home later, his excuses becoming more flimsy. He even had the audacity to suggest a business trip with Chelsea to look at potential investment properties. I almost laughed in his face. "That sounds interesting, Victor," I replied, my voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "Perhaps you could tell me more about it over dinner." He agreed, oblivious to the trap he was walking into. The dinner was set for Christmas Eve, a tradition we'd upheld for years. This year, however, tradition would be broken. This year, Christmas would bring a different kind of gift. A gift of truth, a gift of justice, a gift of sweet revenge. Rain lashed against the dining room windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Sunday dinner, roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, the usual. Victor carved, his hands steady, but his gaze kept flitting to the phone beside his plate. "Pass the gravy, Lillian," he said, his voice a shade too jovial. I did, my hand brushing his. It felt cold, distant. He hadn't touched me properly in months. Not since Chelsea. The thought of her name, a viper coiling in my gut. I watched him, the way he fussed with his napkin, the slight tremor in his fingers, guilt, or just anticipation. "Everything all right, Victor?" I asked, my voice even, betraying nothing. He startled, a fleck of gravy landing on his crisp white shirt. "Fine, Lillian, perfectly fine," he snapped, dabbing at the stain. Jason and his wife, Sarah, exchanged a look. They know. Everyone knew, except perhaps sweet, oblivious Jason. The conversation drifted to Jason's work, a new project he was excited about. I listened, nodding, offering encouragement, but my mind was elsewhere, on the hushed phone calls I'd overheard, the furtive glances Victor exchanged with Chelsea whenever they thought they were alone, the casual touches, the lingering goodbyes. It was a sickening pantomime, and I was forced to play the role of the unwitting fool. "That sounds promising, dear," I said to Jason, forcing a smile. Victor barely registered the conversation, his attention fixed on his phone again. Another message from her, no doubt. He excused himself abruptly, muttering something about an urgent work email. I watched him leave, his back stiff, his steps hurried. The silence that followed his departure was heavy, thick with unspoken words. Sarah cleared her throat. "Mom, are you all right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I managed a weak smile. "Just tired, dear," I lied. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Tired of the deceit, tired of the pretense, tired of the slow, agonizing erosion of everything I'd built. The dining room, once a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, felt cold and hollow now, a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to be a part of. The rain continued to beat against the glass, a relentless rhythm that echoed the pounding in my head. I excused myself, pleading a headache, and retreated to the quiet solitude of my study. Sinking into the worn leather of my armchair, I closed my eyes, willing myself to find some semblance of peace. But the images kept flashing behind my eyelids. Victor's hand on Chelsea's arm, their whispered conversations, the way he looked at her, a look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Years I'd spent building a life with him, a family, a legacy, and now it was all threatened by a fleeting infatuation, a reckless disregard for everything we held dear. I opened my eyes, my gaze falling on the framed photograph on my desk. Victor and I, younger, happier, on our wedding day. He'd looked at me then with such love, such promise. Where had it all gone? Had it ever truly been there? Or was it just another illusion, another lie in a life built on them? I picked up the photograph, my fingers tracing the outline of his face. A wave of sadness washed over me, a deep, aching emptiness that threatened to consume me whole. But beneath the sadness, something else began to stir, a flicker of resolve, a spark of defiance. I wouldn't let him destroy everything. I wouldn't let Chelsea win. I wouldn't let them take what was rightfully mine. I had spent a lifetime building this, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, and I wouldn't let it crumble to dust because of their selfishness. I set the photograph back on the desk, my hand lingering on the cool glass. The storm outside was beginning to subside, the rain softening to a gentle drizzle. The quiet calm that followed was deceptive, because inside me, the storm was just beginning. I had a plan that would protect what was mine, a plan that would ensure they paid for what they had done. And Christmas, just a few months away, would be the perfect time to unveil it. The thought brought a cold, hard smile to my lips. They wouldn't know what hit them. Rain lashed against the window of the Chinatown law office, blurring the neon signs across the street. Mr. Lee, recommended by a friend as discreet, sat behind a desk stacked with files, his expression as impassive as a stone Buddha. "So, Mrs. Barrett, you believe your husband intends to rewrite his will, leaving you with minimal provision?" he asked, his voice soft but precise. "Yes," I replied, my voice catching slightly. He's involved with someone. My daughter-in-law's sister, Chelsea. I believe he intends to provide for her and her friend Julian, at my expense, at my children's expense." The words felt heavy, leaden, each syllable a fresh wound. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a chill deeper than the damp November air. "And the assets in question, these are primarily held within the Barrett family trust?" Mr. Lee inquired, shuffling some papers. I nodded, pulling my shawl tighter around my shoulders. "Established by my late father-in-law," I clarified. "It includes the house, the lake cabin, some rental properties, and a portion of the family business. My father-in-law, a shrewd man, had foreseen the possibility of such complications. My father-in-law, he anticipated potential marital difficulties." My voice was barely above a whisper. The shame of it all pressed down on me, suffocating me. Mr. Lee raised an eyebrow. "He did," he questioned, a hint of intrigue in his tone. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice regaining some strength. "He stipulated specific conditions regarding infidelity." I explained, beginning to feel a glimmer of hope. Protection for the aggrieved party. For me, Mr. Lee leaned forward, his expression now attentive, almost eager. Tell me everything, he urged, his gaze sharp and focused. I swallowed hard, and then I told him. I told him about Victor's increasing absences, his veiled phone calls, the whispers I'd overheard, Chelsea's smug smiles, and the casual mentions of Julian's business ventures, ventures I suspected Victor was bankrolling. I told him about the hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered a room, the furtive glances, the subtle shifts in their behavior. The evidence, while circumstantial, painted a damning picture, and you have reason to believe he plans to alter the trust in favor of Miss Chelsea and Mr. Julian, Mr. Lee asked, making careful notes. Yes, I stated firmly. He's mentioned restructuring his assets, simplifying things, he called it. The phrase echoed in my mind, coated in the sickly sweetness of deceit. Mrs. Barrett, Mr. Lee began, steepling his fingers thoughtfully. Typically, assets within a trust are difficult to contest, particularly after the grantor's passing. He paused, his gaze meeting mine. However, he continued, a subtle shift in his tone. Your father-in-law's foresight may prove advantageous. He leaned back in his chair, a knowing look on his face. The specifics of the trust document are crucial, he explained. If, as you say, it contains clauses pertaining to infidelity, and if such infidelity can be proven, he let the sentence hang in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. My heart pounded in my chest, and if it can be proven, I pressed, my voice barely a whisper. Not if, Mr. Lee corrected, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. When infidelity can be proven, and you're the innocent party. He tapped a finger on the trust documents I'd provided. Then the distribution of assets changes significantly. He spent the next hour meticulously dissecting the clauses of the trust, explaining the intricacies of legal jargon, the potential pitfalls, and, most importantly, the potential rewards. My father-in-law, it seemed, had a deep-seated distrust of second wives and gold diggers, a distrust I now found profoundly grateful for. The trust, designed to protect his legacy, could now protect mine. So I asked, my voice steadier now, what are my options? Mr. Lee laid out a clear, concise plan: discreet investigations, asset tracing, securing legal representation specializing in trust litigation. It was a complex, delicate process, but the potential outcome, the thought of Victor and Chelsea's faces. The moment they realized their scheme had backfired, the image warmed me more than any fireplace ever could. This will take time, Mrs. Barrett, Mr. Lee cautioned. Patience and discretion are key. I nodded, understanding. This wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon, and I was in it to win. And the cost, I asked, a practical question. A necessary question. Mr. Lee named a figure. It was substantial, but a small price to pay for justice, for securing my future, for protecting what was rightfully mine and my children's. As I left the office, the rain had stopped, and the Chinatown streets glistened under the streetlights. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, the weight on my chest slightly lighter. I still had a long road ahead, but for the first time since learning of Victor's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. a sense of purpose. Christmas was just around the corner, and I had a feeling this year it would be a very different kind of celebration. A celebration of justice. A celebration of reclaiming what was mine. The silence in my dining room was deafening, broken only by the clinking of silverware against china. Victor, sitting across from me, pretended to be engrossed in his meal, while Chelsea, seated beside him, fidgeted nervously. I continued to eat, my movements slow and deliberate, my mind racing. More potatoes, Victor? I asked, my voice even and calm. He shook his head, avoiding my gaze. No, thank you, Lillian. His tone was curt, almost dismissive. I pushed a serving dish towards Chelsea. Chelsea, dear, you hardly touched your food. She forced a smile. I'm not very hungry tonight, Mrs. Barrett. I knew why she wasn't hungry. Guilt gnawed at her, just as it gnawed at me. The conversation I'd overheard between them earlier, the whispered words of their betrayal, echoed in my ears. It had been a chance encounter, a fleeting moment of vulnerability they thought no one witnessed. They'd been wrong. I'd seen them in the garden, Victor's hand caressing Chelsea's cheek, his words low and intimate. Now I watched them, my expression unreadable. Beneath the tablecloth, my hand clutched the small recording device I had activated before dinner. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable. I steered the conversation towards innocuous topics, the weather, the upcoming holidays, all the while waiting for the moment they would slip up, reveal the truth they thought so carefully hidden. Julian is looking forward to Christmas at the lake cabin, Chelsea offered, attempting to sound casual. Her words were a calculated move, a reminder of their plans, their future, built on a foundation of lies. Julian, my grandson, oblivious to the web of deceit spun around him. Yes, the cabin, I echoed, my voice laced with a subtle chill. It's always been a special place for our family. My gaze shifted to Victor, who finally met my eyes. A flicker of unease crossed his face. Of course, Lillian, he said, his voice strained. We all cherished the cabin. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable weight pressing down on us. The small talk dwindled, replaced by strained silences and forced smiles. I excused myself from the table, feigning a headache. Please finish your dinner without me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I retreated to my study, closing the door behind me, the recording device still clutched in my hand. The silence of the study was a stark contrast to the forced conviviality of the dining room. I sat at my desk, my hands trembling slightly as I replayed the recording. Their hushed whispers, their carefully chosen words, were now undeniable evidence of their betrayal. Chelsea's anxious voice filled the room. We need to be careful. Victor, she doesn't know. Victor's reply was low and reassuring. Don't worry, my love. She suspects nothing. My love, the words stung, a sharp, bitter taste in my mouth. My heart ached, a dull, throbbing pain that spread through my chest. I had spent my life building a family, a legacy, and now it was crumbling before my eyes. Victor, my husband of 40 years, the man I had trusted implicitly, had betrayed me in the most profound way. And Chelsea, the sister of my daughter-in-law, someone I had welcomed into my home, had conspired with him. The pain was overwhelming, a suffocating wave of grief and anger. I wanted to scream, to rage, to confront them both, and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain, of witnessing the destruction they had wrought. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, forcing myself to regain control. The anger slowly subsided, replaced by cold, hard resolve. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for ignorance. They had thought they could deceive me, steal from me, and get away with it. I opened my eyes, the pain replaced by a steely glint. They were wrong. I would not confront them, not yet. I would play their game, pretend to be oblivious, all the while gathering my strength, plotting my revenge. They thought they were winning. They had no idea what was coming. I wouldn't just reclaim what was rightfully mine. I would make them pay for their betrayal, every single penny. And the lake cabin, the symbol of our family's happiness, would become the stage for their downfall. The upcoming Christmas celebrations, a time of joy and togetherness, would be transformed into a spectacle of their humiliation. I would have my revenge, slow and deliberate, a masterpiece of calculated retribution. The crisp March air nipped at my nose as I sat on the porch swing, a mug of lukewarm tea warming my hands. Chelsea's car pulled up the driveway, a little too fast, a little too aggressively. She practically flew out of the driver's side, her heels clicking on the stone path. "I need to talk to you," she announced, her voice sharper than the wind. "This whole thing is getting out of hand." I simply sipped my tea, letting the silence hang between us. "Julian and I need to make plans," she continued, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "We were supposed to be moving into the house after the wedding." "The house," I echoed, my voice soft. "Yes, the house." Chelsea shifted her weight, avoiding my gaze. "Well, with everything that's happened," she trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "It would just be simpler if you moved out, found something smaller, more manageable." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "Simpler for whom, Chelsea?" I asked, setting my mug down on the small table beside me. "For everyone," she insisted. "You wouldn't have to worry about the upkeep of such a big place. And Julian and I, well, we need the space. We're starting a family." She said the last part with a certain smugness, as if she were holding all the cards. "A family," I repeated, looking out at the sprawling lawn, the ancient oak trees Victor and I had planted together, saplings back then. "You speak of family as though it's something you can just acquire, like a new car or a bigger house." Chelsea's face flushed. "This isn't about acquiring anything," she snapped back. "It's about what's fair. You've had this house long enough. It's our turn now." I met her gaze, a small smile playing on my lips. "Fairness," I mused. "An interesting concept. You know, Chelsea, I've spent my entire life building a family, a home, a legacy. And you think you can just waltz in and claim it as your own?" She crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "Victor promised me," she began, but I cut her off. "Victor promised you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Victor promised me a life together, a future built on trust and respect. He broke those promises, didn't he? And now you think you deserve the spoils of his betrayal." Chelsea opened her mouth to retort, but I continued, my voice gaining strength. You think you're entitled to the fruits of my labor, the home I created, the life I built brick by brick. It's not like that, she muttered, her bravado fading. Julian, I interrupted, my voice laced with steel. What does Julian have to do with any of this? He hasn't put a single dime into this house, into this family. He's an outsider, Chelsea. And you, I paused, letting the unspoken words hang in the air. She finally looked down, her shoulders slumping. I just want what's best for us, she whispered. What's best for you? I repeated, my voice softer now, but no less resolute. Or what's best for Victor? She flinched at his name, her eyes darting back up to mine. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely audible. I leaned back on the swing, the gentle creaking a counterpoint to the turmoil swirling around us. You seem awfully confident, Chelsea, I said, a hint of amusement in my tone. Confident that Victor will be able to provide for you, to maintain the lifestyle you clearly expect. But have you considered what if he can't? She frowned, confusion clouding her features. What are you talking about? I'm talking about consequences, Chelsea, I said, my gaze steady. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences can be far-reaching. I let the words hang in the air, watching as a flicker of uncertainty, of fear, began to dance in her eyes. I wouldn't be so sure of your future if I were you, I added, a thin smile playing on my lips. Victor's promises, they're not always what they seem. Chelsea stood there for a moment, her face pale, her earlier confidence completely gone. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, shaking her head slightly. Finally, without another word, she turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking on the stone path, a different rhythm now, a rhythm of retreat. I watched her drive away, the tires crunching on the gravel, and then I turned back to my lukewarm tea, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over me. The game, I realized, was just beginning. The lake cabin, fully transferred into my name just yesterday, suddenly felt a lot more appealing. And Christmas, just a few months away, would be interesting. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Victor sat across from me, meticulously buttering his toast, a picture of composure I found increasingly irritating. I've scheduled a meeting with Mr. Henderson, he announced, his voice carefully neutral, next Tuesday, 10 o'clock, to discuss these separation arrangements. I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste mirroring the churning in my stomach. That seemed sufficient, I replied, my voice as steady as I could manage. He nodded, oblivious to the irony. It's best to handle these things quickly and cleanly, Victor said, as if we were discussing a business deal and not the dismantling of our 30-year marriage. Henderson is very discreet. Discreet? The word hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Discreet about the affair with Chelsea. Discreet about the hushed phone calls. Discreet about the lies that had woven their way into the fabric of our lives. And what exactly do you propose we separate? I asked, placing my cup on the table with a deliberate click. Victor cleared his throat. Well, the house, obviously, and the lake cabin. He paused, his gaze flicking towards the window, towards the manicured lawn that represented so many years of shared memories. The rental properties as well, I assume, he added, as if an afterthought. And naturally, a fair division of assets related to the family business. He met my gaze, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher in his eyes. Was it guilt? Or simply anticipation? Of course, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Inside, a cold, hard knot of resolve was tightening. He seemed to take my quiet acquiescence as agreement. He relaxed slightly, reaching for the marmalade. Good, good. He spread it thickly on his toast, the scraping sound grating on my nerves. I'll have Henderson draw up the papers. We can review them together next week. He took a large bite, chewing thoughtfully. I watched him, a strange calmness settling over me. He thought he had won. He thought he could just waltz away with half of everything we had built together, his secret intact, his life undisturbed. He had underestimated me. Victor, I began, my voice deceptively soft. There are a few details you seem to have overlooked. He looked up, a question in his eyes. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach my eyes. For instance, I continued, picking up my coffee cup again, the porcelain warm against my fingers, the trust. He frowned. What trust? The Barrett family trust, established by my grandfather, meticulously maintained by my father, and now solely under my control. Victor knew about it, of course, but he, like everyone else, assumed it was simply a modest fund for future generations. He had no idea of its true scope, of the careful investments and strategic acquisitions that had grown it exponentially over the years. The one that holds the majority of our assets, I said, my voice still soft, but with a new edge. His eyes widened slightly. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice tinged with a hint of unease. The house, the cabin, the rental properties, the business shares. I listed them slowly, savoring each word. They're all held within the trust, established long before our marriage, Victor, designed to protect the family's interests. The color drained from his face. He put down his toast, the marmalade glistening obscenely on the untouched surface. "William, your husband," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm entitled to, you're entitled to nothing," I said, my voice finally rising, the carefully constructed facade of composure cracking. "You forfeited any claim to my family's legacy the moment you chose to betray our vows, to betray me." He stared at me, his mouth open slightly, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. I continued, pressing my advantage. "Mr. Henderson is a fine lawyer, I'm sure, but he can't undo a legally binding trust established generations ago." I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering, "and he certainly can't rewrite the terms that explicitly exclude anyone proven to have acted against the best interests of the family." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a steady, relentless reminder of the passage of time, of the life we had built together, and the future he had so carelessly thrown away. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, he just shook his head slowly, his face ashen. "You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I met his gaze, my own eyes cold and hard. "Wouldn't I?" I asked, a flicker of something dangerous in my voice. He knew the answer. He saw it in my eyes, in the set of my jaw, in the quiet strength that emanated from me. He had underestimated me, and now he was about to pay the price. I rose from the table, leaving him sitting there, amidst the remnants of his uneaten breakfast, the sunlight streaming in, illuminating the wreckage of his carefully constructed plans. "Tell Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound authority, "that I look forward to seeing him on Tuesday. I have a few adjustments I'd like to make to the proposed separation agreement." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him alone with the bitter taste of his betrayal. The knot in my stomach had loosened, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. Christmas was just around the corner, and I had a very special present in mind for Victor and Chelsea. The crisp December air nipped at my face as I stepped into the Concord Law Office. My hands, tucked inside my gloves, were surprisingly steady. I hadn't slept properly in weeks, the image of Victor and Chelsea together a constant, unwelcome guest in my mind. Mrs. Barrett, the receptionist, greeted me, her voice a hushed whisper. "Mr. Davies is waiting for you." I gave her a curt nod, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it, the culmination of weeks of meticulous planning, of poring over documents, of swallowing my pride and my fury. Mr. Davies, my lawyer, rose to greet me as I entered his office. He offered me a seat, his expression unreadable. "Everything is in place, Lillian," he said, his voice low. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Absolutely," I replied, my voice unwavering despite the tremor in my hands. Victor thought he could waltz away with everything, leaving me with nothing but the scraps of our 30-year marriage. He thought he and Chelsea, with their clandestine meetings and whispered promises, were so clever. He underestimated me. "Let's begin," I said, meeting Mr. Davies' gaze directly. Victor and Chelsea arrived shortly after, their faces etched with a mixture of smug confidence and barely concealed impatience. Chelsea, in particular, radiated a self-satisfied glow that made my stomach churn. She practically preened as she greeted Mr. Davies, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Good morning, Mr. So glad you could squeeze us in on such short notice." She shot me a triumphant smirk, a look that said, "See, he's on our side." I kept my expression neutral, the memory of their betrayal fueling the fire within me. Victor, predictably, was all bluster. "Let's get this over with," he boomed, his voice echoing in the small office. "I've got more important things to do than sit around here listening to legal jargon." He cast a dismissive glance in my direction, the contempt in his eyes stinging like a slap. He had no idea what was coming. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and began to speak. "As you know, we're here today to finalize the division of assets between Mr. and Mrs. Barrett." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the three of us. "Mr. Barrett, you filed for ownership of the marital home, the lake cabin, and a significant portion of the joint investment portfolio. Is that correct?" Victor puffed up his chest, a smug grin spreading across his face. "That's right," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "And I'm confident that I have a strong case." He looked at Chelsea, his eyes full of a sickeningly sweet affection. It was then that I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face, a tiny seed of unease that I knew would soon blossom into full-blown panic. "And you, Miss Chelsea?" Mr. Davies continued, turning his attention to her. You filed a claim for a portion of Mr. Barrett's assets, citing your relationship with him and alleging promises of financial support. Correct? Chelsea opened her mouth to speak, but Mr. Davies held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Before you answer, he said, his voice now taking on a steely edge, I'd like to present some documents of my own. He pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table towards Victor. Victor frowned, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the pages. His complexion paled with each turn, the smug grin slowly fading from his face. Chelsea craned her neck to see, her eyes widening in alarm. What is this? Victor sputtered, his voice trembling slightly. This, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Davies said, his voice calm and measured, is a copy of the amended trust documents drawn up by your late father-in-law. It clearly states that in the event of infidelity on the part of either spouse, all marital assets revert solely to the wrong party. And further, he added, his gaze now fixed on Chelsea, that any third party attempting to claim a portion of those assets based on a relationship with the adulterous spouse forfeits any right to those assets and can be held liable for legal fees incurred in defending the trust. The blood drained from Chelsea's face. She looked at Victor, her eyes wide with panic. Victor stared back at her, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. The air in the room crackled with tension. Mr. Davies continued, furthermore, Mrs. Barrett has, with my assistance, legally documented all instances of Mr. Barrett's infidelity, including financial transactions, gifts, and travel records. Evidence that, he paused for emphasis, will be more than sufficient to uphold the terms of the trust. Victor opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked utterly defeated, the bluster replaced by a stark, stunned silence. Chelsea began to cry, her carefully constructed facade crumbling around her. But he promised, she sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. He promised me everything. I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile. He promised you everything, did he? And now, thanks to his own arrogance and your greed, you both have nothing. Mr. Davies addressed me directly, his voice regaining its professional tone. Mrs. Barrett, he said, congratulations. The house, the lake cabin, the rental properties, the family business all remain solely in your possession. Mr. Barrett and Ms. Chelsea will receive nothing. I met his gaze, my own eyes now shining with a quiet triumph. Thank you, Mr. Davies, I said, my voice steady and clear. I rose from my seat, my legs feeling surprisingly strong. As I walked towards the door, I glanced back at Victor and Chelsea, their faces a mixture of shock, despair, and utter disbelief. The Christmas lights twinkled merrily in the windows of the law office, casting a warm glow on the snow-covered streets outside. It was a beautiful day, my day. Sunlight streamed into my kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Jason stood in the doorway, his face pale, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a ghost, a shadow of the vibrant man he once was. Mom, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. I gestured to the chair across from me at the kitchen table. Sit down, Jason. He hesitated, then pulled out the chair and sank into it, his eyes avoiding mine. I waited patiently, pouring myself a cup of tea. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "She lied to me," he choked out, the words catching in his throat. "Chelsea, she lied about everything." My heart ached for my son. I knew what was coming. I'd seen the storm brewing for months, felt the tremors of deceit beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect relationship. "What did she lie about, Jason?" I asked gently, even though I already knew the answer. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling. "The trust fund," he said, his voice raw with pain. "She knew about it all along. She was using me." He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the teacups. "She didn't even try to hide it. When I confronted her, she just laughed. Said I was stupid to think she'd marry me for anything other than the money." I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "I'm so sorry, Jason," I said softly. "You deserve better than this." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion. "But how did she even know about the trust?" I sighed. "It's a long story, Jason." I explained how Chelsea had subtly questioned me about our finances, feigning innocent curiosity about our family's history. How she'd wormed her way into my confidence, pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law while secretly plotting her takeover. I told him about the conversations I'd overheard between Chelsea and Julian, their whispers about securing their future, their plans to use the trust fund to finance their lavish lifestyle. I revealed how I'd seen the greed in her eyes, the calculating glint that belied her sweet facade. Jason listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of disbelief. "I can't believe it," he murmured, shaking his head. "I was so blind." "You were in love, Jason," I said gently. "Love can make us blind to many things." He sat there for a long moment, absorbing the weight of my words. Then he looked up at me, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "We're going to take back what's ours," I said firmly, "and we're going to make sure they get nothing." I explained my plan, the intricate web I'd woven to protect our family's assets. I'd already transferred the bulk of the trust fund into a new account, one that Chelsea couldn't access. I'd also restructured the ownership of our properties, the house, the lake cabin, the rental properties, ensuring that they remained firmly within our family's control. And finally, I'd taken steps to safeguard the family business, putting measures in place to prevent any hostile takeover attempts. Jason listened intently, his eyes widening with each revelation. You planned all of this?" he asked incredulously. I nodded. "I had to protect our family, Jason," I said simply. "I couldn't let them take everything we've worked so hard for." He reached out and took my hand, his grip tight. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved us." I smiled sadly. "We saved ourselves, Jason," I corrected him. Together, the phone rang, shattering the quiet moment. I glanced at the caller ID. It was my lawyer. "It's time," I said to Jason, a steely glint in my eye. Time to deliver the final blow. I answered the phone, and as I listened to my lawyer's confirmation, a slow smile spread across my face. Everything was in place. The divorce papers were filed. The evidence of Chelsea's deceit was irrefutable. and the restraining order against Julian was granted. They were about to lose everything. I hung up the phone and turned to Jason. "It's done," I said, my voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. "They have nothing." He grinned, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, raising his glass of water in a mock toast. I chuckled, the tension finally draining from my shoulders. "Merry Christmas, Jason." The Christmas tree in the corner, adorned with twinkling lights and shimmering ornaments, seemed to glow a little brighter. This year, Christmas wouldn't be about extravagant gifts or lavish celebrations. It would be about family, about resilience, and about the quiet triumph of righting a wrong. It would be about the sweet taste of revenge. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had weathered the storm, and we had emerged stronger than ever. We had saved our family, and we had protected our legacy. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.